All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our ICM webinar. My name is Brian Friedman. I'm the GVP of Sales at SoftClouds. We're pleased to have you here today, and thank you for joining us. During the course of the webinar, we will have a number of polling questions that we're going to put up at different times, so feel free to express your opinion on those polls. And also, at the end, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the question box in the webinar, and we'll get to those towards the end. So we'll get started. We're going to talk about the ICM part of the Oracle Sales Suite. So as you can see, Oracle has a very extensive suite of sales products. Sales performance management is a piece of that, but then of course there's Salesforce automation, customer data management, channel management, and platform. Today, though, we're really going to focus in on the sales performance management piece and specifically incentive compensation. So why is there a need for incentive compensation? Really, there's a number of reasons why companies look to incentive compensation programs or applications to assist them. One of the biggest problems that companies have, especially if they have complex payment scenarios or complex commission scenarios, is that the cost to administer those programs is very high. And it's very high in terms of people costs, both in terms of time, as well as just the number of people that have to manage to it. So as you increase in complexity, as the commission or compensation plans increase in complexity, then of course it becomes much more difficult to use manual processes to handle commissions and compensation. And really, as a result of that, what happens is you've got a high level of inaccuracy when you're making payments to the various payees, the salespeople or other people who are entitled to compensation. And there's really a lack or a disconnection between the sales performance metrics and the plans of the organization. We'll talk about that a lot more as we go on. But really what a company wants to do is make sure that their compensation plans are directly tied to the needs of the individuals receiving the compensation and also to the needs of the company. So if revenues need to increase, for example, the company needs to find ways to stimulate additional growth and additional sales. And a good incentive compensation application can allow that to happen. So as we look at the ICM landscape, what we'll really see is that compensation programs can be used to really help incentivize employees and external contractors to do more for the company, to really be able to increase sales, to increase the way in which the company distributes its products, and it enables a better bottom line and better growth for the company. So what we really want to do is we want to tie together a good incentive compensation program with the needs of the company and the needs of the people who are receiving the compensation itself. So let's talk a little bit about how incentive compensation improves sales. Well, first of all, we can look at using the incentive compensation plans to build up territories, to build up the sales methodology, and to really help the company meet its quotas, meet the needs of the company, and have better results at the end of any quarter or any fiscal year. And we can do this with a lot of tools that enable both the customer as well as, the employee as well as the company to be able to see if things aren't working properly. So any number of things such as identifying individuals who are falling short of their quotas or exceeding their quotas, being able to identify situations where the company isn't meeting its goals in terms of sales and revenue. And all of this really helps to give a clearer picture on both sides, on the company side, as well as those receiving the compensation, so that everyone knows how they're doing in real time. And it's almost impossible to do this type of reporting and monitoring if you're using an antiquated system or no system at all, just trying to use spreadsheets and other means to track these things. So in order to have real-time verifiable data, it requires a very modern incentive compensation program to be able to do that. So let's look at some of the features of the Oracle incentive compensation application. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the 9 different features of the Oracle platform so that you can really see how each of these features comes to play and assists in a better compensation plan and a better compensation module for both the company and those receiving compensation. So at the first part, we're going to look at sales performance and compensation. And before we do that, we have a quick poll here if you want to take a look at that. Okay, thank you for answering, and we will move on. So the sales performance platform really allows for the company to measure and track progress towards goals. And this is done in 2 different ways, really. It's done for the company to be able to measure performance towards goals, and it's also done for those who are receiving the compensation. And when we talk about compensation, we're really talking both traditional, which is internal commissions, and we're talking about external. So there might be sales reps, independent agents, et cetera, who are outside of the organization but are receiving compensation for their activities on behalf of the company. And everybody really wants to know how they're doing in real time, as well as being able to understand what the eventual remuneration is going to be. So all of this helps when you've got a modern platform to be able to give this type of information on a real-time basis to all of the participants. And when we do that, we're really being able to manage the amounts that someone's going to receive. And we can also look at if there's discrepancies or there's disputes or there's overpayment or underpayment. All of these things can be identified in real time using an incentive compensation platform. So it really enables the distribution of real-time information to all of the participants. Second, we can look at the credit allocations. And what this means is sometimes when there are transactions, there can be numerous people involved, and they might get different or in some cases no compensation for a transaction that takes place. So all of this can be programmed into the ICM platform and enable the company to be able to properly distribute commissions or compensation to the people who are entitled to it and in the amount that they're entitled to. So all of this really then becomes a very modern, efficient way to track and distribute compensation to various individuals or companies. And then we can have an approval process as well. So in some instances, the compensation can be immediate and automatic based on the transaction that took place. And in other cases, it could require someone to approve the transaction or the distribution of the payment before it's made. So by doing this, we're able to have a very streamlined, uniform workflow so that everyone knows who's involved in a particular process or transaction. And we can automatically trigger that workflow based on certain triggering events. So any number of things like who gets paid or when they get paid, or whether there's adjustments or modifications to the transaction, any number of these things can be done using this payment approval or the configurable workflow. And then, of course, there's instances where there's discrepancies. And what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to have a clear methodology for identifying the discrepancy. And it could be any number of places. It could be by the individual who receives the compensation. It could be by someone who was in the chain of this transaction, but wasn't properly compensated. Any number of things can happen. And the system itself allows for this dispute to be registered and to create, again, a recognizable workflow for how that dispute gets resolved. We can also have compensation paid or monitored between organizations. So we could have a company that has numerous divisions. We could have sellers who are selling across these different divisions, whatever it might be. Any number of these complexities can be managed using the Oracle Incentive Compensation application. And when we've got that, again, if you think about doing this on a manual basis, it becomes significantly more complicated as you increase the complexity of the transactions or the number of parties or entities that are involved. So when we look at that all, we can look at this and say, using a very modern platform, we can take away those complexities and we can really make this a much easier, simpler process to be able to manage to. And then in instances, especially with multinational companies or companies that have sellers in different countries, currencies become an issue. If you have a company that's based in the United States with sellers who are around the world, they want to be able to distribute payments to those sellers in the correct currency and in the correct amount. So using the incentive compensation platform, we're able to do this properly and efficiently and to account for different currencies, different conversion rates, currency fluctuations, etc. So all of this can be done using a modern incentive compensation platform. And then all of this leads into a mobile application. So what the mobile app allows is, especially for sellers, they're in the field, they don't have access to their laptop or desktop, but they do have their mobile device with them. And they can access the incentive compensation platform on mobile to be able to understand in real time where they're at with the different transactions, but they also can use this to figure out what the value of an upcoming transaction could be as well. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but when you think about it, as we go to tying the goals of the company to the performance of the sellers, we really want to be making the sellers aware of how to create better margins and revenues for the company, and in turn, how that will affect the sellers by being able to gain more compensation for their transactions. And then we have an analytics function, and the analytics becomes extremely important because what this does is it allows everyone to see in real time the appropriate information. We can do hierarchical representations here, which means that certain people have access to certain information that others don't see. But we want to make sure that the individuals who should see transactions, updates, etc., are able to see that in real time or near real time. And so this is what's really important in this respect. So I think we've got another poll question coming in here. Okay, thank you. And one of the things that becomes important as we do the implementation of an incentive compensation program or application is to be able to integrate it into other applications so that we have a flow of information coming in and going out. We want to be able to integrate into the CRM system. We want to be able to integrate into the back office ERP system. And in other cases where we're doing the configuration of applications or of products, we also want to be able to go into a CPQ system. And that CPQ system really enables the seller to be able to see, as they configure a product or a SKU or a BOM, they're able to see in real time the effect that that has on the compensation that they could be receiving for the transaction. So what I'd like to do now is talk to you a bit about some of the use cases and instances where SoftClouds has implemented incentive compensation for our customers. The first instance is for a leading packaging company that had numerous SKUs, different types of boxes and packaging. And not only did they provide standard stock, but they also did a lot of custom packaging and customized boxes. And what really became necessary here is, because they had all of these different standard size as well as any number of customized size, they always had this challenge that they couldn't directly figure out easily and efficiently what the transaction would look like for the company as well as for the sellers. So they had numerous commissionable components, which would be anything from base commissions coming out for a transaction to no commission at all. But what they really wanted to do is they wanted the sales revenue goals tied to the commissions themselves. And so when you think about this, this gets to what we were talking about earlier, which was that the company wants to make sure that the sellers are aligned to the company's goals of profitability in doing the transactions. And so they wanted to be able to get to a position where the sellers could know and understand that a higher margin transaction would result in a higher commission or compensation to the seller. So what we did here is we tied together the incentive compensation program to several of the back office facilities that this company had. And I think here we've got another polling question that will come in. Okay. So what we did is, by tying the back office, the ERP, to the front office compensation program, we were able to bring together all of these different components in a way that enabled the company to be able to really better understand and know when they were making a good margin. And they also were enabling the sellers to have a view and an understanding of the value of that transaction to the company, as well as the value to the seller. And so our solution really did a number of things. We brought together all of these different programs and plans that the company had. We brought all the logic together so that the commissions could be adjusted and done properly during the course of the transactions. We streamlined all the data using business intelligence to give real-time, accurate reports to both the company and the sellers. And one of the more important things in any of these implementations is it has to be very easy to maintain. So what we try to do during the course of any implementation is we bring the customer up in their knowledge and their understanding of how to maintain and manage the application, so that once we're done with the implementation, the company is able to maintain it themselves. And this can be any number of things. So they can adjust the commissionable rates, they can adjust the time period, they can adjust the quotas, any number of things that come along during the course of a transaction, so that the company has the flexibility to make changes as they need to be able to meet their goals. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that the logic is scaled in a way so that we're addressing all of the concerns and any exceptions that might be done in terms of the customer logic or the custom logic that's needed for these transactions. So the outcome, they had a very scalable calculation logic. They had multi-divisional compensation plans, and they were able to have the type of reporting that was necessary so that everybody knew and understood what they were doing and how they were performing. So as we move on, let's talk about another example of where we implemented incentive compensation for one of our customers. In this case, this is a lighting design company based in California, and they have suppliers throughout the United States as well as in Canada. And when we looked at this company, what we saw is they had a number of challenges in trying to make their calculations for compensation. They had numerous different systems, and so it was very difficult to bring the commissions and the compensation logic together in one place. There were many different data sources, so invoices, credit memos, different places where this was coming from. They weren't able to be flexible in terms of making changes to their compensation plan on a real-time or near real-time basis. And they found that they were not able to handle exceptions. So this company had internal sellers as well as external sellers. And obviously there's different rules for compensation of each of those, as well as there's different ways in which the internal and external sellers are compensated. So what they were looking for was a transparent mechanism to be able to make these payments to the internal and external sellers. They needed something that was easy to maintain and something that they could use and maintain after we finished with the implementation. They wanted a way to integrate this to various data sources, so inbound and outbound data sources that they were looking at. They wanted to make sure that their payments were made on time and that they were accurate. And they wanted to have the accountability that was needed internally and externally, so that everyone knew that the transactions that were being processed were accurate, correct, and timely. So what we did with this is we created a point-to-point integration for quick turnaround of the delivery. The reps, the individuals who are receiving the compensation, are now happy with the new system because they have the sales data in their hands. They're able to see the results of their activities and understand when they're going to be compensated and how. And it's a significantly greater, improved system that has a much better level of transparency. So when we look at this, we really see that there's a number of best practices that we want to address in every one of our incentive compensation implementations. The first and probably the foremost part of it is understanding the data that we're dealing with. So we need to understand the inbound and the outbound data, and we need to be able to understand the complexities of how the company works, how it operates, and how it pays out its compensation to various individuals or entities. We also want to work on and understand the reporting cycle. So in doing this, we need to really know, is this happening on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, when it works, and how it works in terms of the closing. And we need to create a system that's designed properly so that it's easy to use for those who are administering the system, as well as it's easy to use for the people who are gathering or gaining information outside of the system. And then last, of course, is the ability to communicate all of this to the various companies. So when we look at the various instances of incentive compensation, we can really start to see how the greater the complexity of the transaction or the reporting, the greater the need for a very modern incentive compensation platform becomes. We have one instance where we were working with a financial institution that had hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals who were doing collections work. And the compensation for those collectors is extremely complex because every transaction that they establish is unique. And in some instances, they're collecting on a monthly basis over a long period of time. So the biggest problem that this company had was it took them nearly a month to create the calculations for compensation to their collectors every month. and they were always running behind. They were running with significant number of resources, and it just took a great deal of time and effort to be able to do this processing. So using a modern incentive compensation platform like the Oracle platform, we were able to show them how they could significantly reduce the time to process these transactions, as well as the manpower needed to be able to do it. It became much more accurate, it became much more efficient, and more importantly, it was very timely to be able for them to get the compensation paid out at the right time and on the right basis. So if we look at the future of incentive compensation, what we're really seeing is that the complexity of these transactions are going to increase, and the difficulty in making sure that the sellers, the individuals being compensated, are being compensated accurately, efficiently, and timely is going to get more so as well. And one of the things I want to focus on is that the incentives will be used to align the sales team with the company's goals of profitability. This is what I'm talking about with that box company that I gave the example on earlier, because what they were doing and what they were seeing is that once they implemented the Oracle ICM platform, they were able to align the sellers to the company's goals of profitability. The sellers could see when they were going to get more or less compensation for a transaction. And in turn, the company found higher margins and higher profitability. And so all of this really led to a very successful result that enabled the company to be more successful and the sellers to be more successful as well. So very quickly, our capabilities, we really do the full incentive compensation implementation. We do everything from the UI design all the way through the implementation, the training, support, and integration. And we do this for the purpose of really leaving our customer with a modern system that addresses their needs, but also is something that they can manage and modify as they need to over the course of time after we finish with the implementation. So with that, really just the recap on SoftClouds. We do try to take a very strategic view. We try to take a very consultative approach with our customers, and we really go in to understand the needs of the customer and the best way to meet those needs and do the proper implementation. And when you're working with something like an incentive compensation platform, it's extremely important to be able to do this because we need to know where the pain points are. We need to understand how to correctly solution, and we need to leave the customer with a viable system that they can use to improve and to maintain going forward. So with that, I thank you for attending. See if we have any questions.
Hey, Brian. This is Renee. There's actually a couple of questions that came in.
Sure.
Okay, so the first one is, what other programs, platforms can Oracle ICM be integrated with?
Great question. As I was talking about, it's really important for the ICM platform to be integrated with a number of different sources of information so that we're collecting all of this on a real-time basis. We're collecting all of the information that we need to accurately predict and to accurately develop the compensation models. So in doing that, what we can do is we can integrate with everything from the CRM systems on the front side, CPQ, which is configuration platform in the middle office, and the back office platforms such as ERP. So we're doing this to be able to pull in as much information as possible to be able to give accurate forecasting of the commissions and the compensation that's paid.
Okay, great. Looks like there's another question. Besides commissions, what else can ICM be used for?
We found a number of instances where sellers are being paid a compensation for creating a transaction. So it may not be a direct commission, so to speak, but it could be anything from a referral fee to bring an opportunity that refer doesn't actually sell, but they create the opportunity. It can also be used for paying things like incentives. So we could be doing anything where a transaction takes place, there's a commission or a traditional commission, and then there's an incentive that's paid to either the seller or to someone else for bringing the transaction in. So almost any number of instances where there's a compensation paid, the ICM platform can be used.
Okay, great. Let's see here. What scalability of compensation calculation logic is used for ICM?
So when we look at that, I think probably the instance of the collectors that I gave is the best one, because they had thousands of collectors, tens of thousands of transactions, and many, many different variables of the different types of commissions that would be paid for a collection scenario that was set up. And really, it's close to infinite, actually. So we can come up with any number of different schemes for the payment of the compensation. As long as it meets up to the company's goals, it really can be put into the ICM platform.
Okay, great. And it looks like there's one last question. How can compensation managers create, track, and resolve disputes using ICM?
So what we do there is we can always have these various input resources available. So we're bringing in all of the real-time transactions that are taking place. And because this information is available and integrated into the ICM tool, we're able to go and take this information and use it to reconcile any types of difficulties or any types of discrepancies that we might have. So it's always available to be able to do that. And we can, one of the benefits really of the ICM platform is to be able to resolve any disputes easily and accurately using the data that's available.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
Sure. And I do see there's also a couple of questions that have come in on the Q&A. We would be happy to arrange a live demo of the ICM tool. And what we'll do is we'll reach out, or if you want, you can contact me directly. And I'd be happy to set up a live demo of how the tool works and some of the benefits. And then we can also talk about your use cases as well, so that we're able to show you the types of functionality that would be useful for you. The other question is about the flexibility for the change in business rules. And that's really something that we make sure that we create when we're doing the implementation, is to enable the company to be able to go in and make the changes that are needed based on current circumstances. So it's extremely flexible, and it's very intuitive for the company to be able to go in and make changes and take advantage of different changing needs in the company. So we'd be happy to reach out, or definitely contact me, and we'll schedule a further call to talk about the platform itself and then what your needs might be. With that, I thank you all for attending today. Appreciate your stopping by, and hope you found this valuable. Thank you, and have a great day.